Hey guys, this is Hans Nero of North Pole. Today we will look a bit at the treasury papers, and the original one, and this is from 2019, and the new one from 2022. So without further ado, let's look at it. Okay, so the original paper, it was something I talked about quite a lot in my 2020 summit presentation on collaborative mechanisms. And I found the original ideas from the treasury paper really interesting. I'm all for it, as my presentation titled back then, Collaborative Mechanisms and How We Could Do Better. And this is one of the goals of this treasury system, is to create proper collaborative mechanisms to efficiently give out funds to further the blockchain. So it was based on having these treasury periods with project proposals that are submitted, discussed, and then voted for. So you could argue it has an offline or off-chain discussion part, and then an on-chain voting part. And then you have this rank, and whatever projects are ranked high enough are funded from the treasury. And one important part of the original paper was this idea, or it's not from the paper, of course, the idea of liquid democracy, but to actually try to implement it in this voting system. So it actually tried to offer both that you have these experts that you can delegate your vote to, but you can also directly vote yourself. And that's important, as we'll see in the second treasury paper, is because you need to have this form of sustainability where you will be able to vote on everything. No person has ever all the knowledge about all the different topics, so sometimes the best you can do is try to find people that you trust or believe have the knowledge in a topic to inform you, and then make your own decision about what to vote, or trust them enough that you would let them vote for you. So it strikes a very good middle ground between direct democracy, where you always vote one-to-one, and something that could be quite hard then to get a majority, could be more hard then to have the best knowledge base for voting, and it could also take time if you have to have a full tally and have to have a supermajority. But sometimes it's very good, because some topics are something everyone can form an opinion about, and it's important to everyone in a more general sense, and then maybe it's good to have a direct vote of it. But other topics are more specialized, and maybe it's good that you can delegate to an expert to try to get the opinion form that is based on the a priori art in the topic, and then inform you as a voter so that you have a better quality in your decision making. That's really actually the basis of voting. What are you doing? You're making a decision. You're voting and deciding on something. So you want to have as good as possible decision making process. But in the paper, it has a method called yes, no, abstain. There's so many different voting methods. I covered some of them in my presentation in 2020, but this method has a threshold, so that's why it's called a fuzzy threshold voting. It basically means that this rank, if you don't have a number of votes total for it, I don't remember the exact number, if it's 10%, but if some X number or percentage has voted for it and it's not above this threshold, it will not be included in this real list or rank, and then it will not have a chance to get funding. But if it gets above this threshold, you have this chance to be voted based on your rank in the total rank, and based on what you ask and how many before you have taken funds based on their ranks and what's available left of funding. So one big problem with this method is when you have this global voting system where there's so many projects, the chance that a local project will reach the threshold is very low. This is why I think it would be good to have differentiation. Maybe you could have a vote on global, then you have this regional treasury, and then you have this local treasury. But at some point, if there's too many projects, this fuzzy threshold could work against being something that's good for the system total. One voting process that has been highly looked at lately is the quadratic voting. It's been some books and some experiments have been showing some success with this method. For me, it's really basically a middle ground between one vote, one person, and you vote as much as you own in the system. And it's a good middle ground because what you don't want is for old-time whales that own a lot of the value in the system to stagnate new innovations. It could be good overall for the blockchain to have new ideas, but it could hurt maybe some part of the old guard. And that is why you want to have a system that encourages innovation over time. Because that's one of the main goals of these treasuries, I guess, is to make a sustainable system that evolves the blockchain and moves it forward and makes it survive. Because you will vote on protocol changes, you vote on projects on the blockchain, and why are you doing these things at all? You're doing this because you want the blockchain to thrive, you want it to survive, you want it to evolve and succeed. So importantly in this paper, it doesn't say that you have to use this exact method of voting. You can easily use the same math and the same methods on other voting methods. So it will be interesting to see if we're at some point we will try to experiment with quadratic voting and other voting systems as well. Another thing I would like to highlight from the original paper is this voting committee. So in the original paper, you need to have someone tallying up the vote, and these, I don't know if you can call them nodes, but this committee have to form an agreement, and then they will jointly generate the voting key, and then after compute date and sign the treasury decisions. And as far as I know, this was run by Jormungandr, and it will be, and Jormungandr, for those who don't know, it was the original incentivized testnet testing blockchain. It was a wonderful experience for me to get to know Jormungandr. I would like to know if it's still run by IOHG, and I think it would be good for the community and good for the blockchain itself if it was decentralized. It was not just one entity running it. So I don't know, honestly. I just want to know more. Is it still run by Jormungandr? Is it how many nodes, or how large is this voting committee? Is it only IOHG? Who consists of this voting committee? Are there any structures to hand this over to the community? What's the plan? What's the long-term view? And what's good for the blockchain? Is it good for the blockchain that one entity has this voting committee, or is it good for the blockchain that this is part of the community of the blockchain itself? And of course, the paper was not just meant for Cardano, but it needs to have a system where you distinguish between coin ownership and stake ownership. And in our case, I think they implemented it with having a snapshot where they then move the value of the snapshot over to your Jormungandr network, and that is your voting tally, with a limit of at least 500 ADA in the snapshot to be able to vote. What else? Yeah, and for me, I want to highlight also that in the original paper, they have this expert class. I think that is the new experiment we're going to do with direct representation, or DREP. And I want to highlight that this is in itself not a good or bad thing. It can be good, it can be bad, but it's all about the process. So if you have processes where you put these experts up against each other, what you will have is competition. That can be good, but it can also cause confusion, and it can also cause you to have the one shouting the largest, or a popularity contest. That is what you can get. But what you really want, in my opinion, is you want positive collaborative processes where it's trying to show as much information about the subject as possible to the voters, and no single person can be an expert in any topic in this age and time we are in now, because there's so many detailed knowledge to know. So I think at least that's a natural progress we are headed towards. So for expert classes too, on a topic, you need to have this collaborative process, and it should be the group and the opinion of the group that matters. And then it's not fragile when suddenly one expert leaves the community or another expert joins. If we create good collaborative processes for these groups of DREPs, then it's not as vulnerable, and we move the system forward. So it will be very interesting to see how this process is planned, and how it will encourage collaborative processes that are positive for a group compared with positive for a single individual. What else? So in the original paper, it was 10% of all the votes in positive difference. So I guess that means you tally up the yes and you tally up the no, and you deduct the no from the yes, and it should be 10% or more. And if not, you are not part of this rank. I honestly don't know how it works in Catalyst now, if it's implemented directly as this. So if someone knows, let me know in the comments section. I think it's important that these categories in Catalyst is solved by the community itself, driving new categories, and that's is a good way to solve the problem of or the fact that a blockchain is constantly evolving. There will never be always the same things you need to vote on, or the same things you need to support with the treasury. So the ideal case would be that this would not be an off-chain collaborative process, but that we could actually move some of this to the on-chain voting, so that we can create new groups on-chain itself. That will be really good for decentralization, because then it will not be a popularity contest of a project in discussions. It will not matter if you have a seat in one of the groups that are driving or having a leading positions in a discussion, but that you can actually, anyone can propose, and anyone can have a direct vote on a topic or a representative vote on a topic. It will at least be much easier that it's no longer a popularity contest, no longer who shouts loudest. But of course, let's be real, any decision process with many people deciding on it has some form of element of popularity. So you can't get away with this, but the goal is to give the voters as many good proposals to vote on as possible, so that they can make popular projects because they are quality projects. And that's it's an important point about this critique of collaborative decision making, is that it could kill innovation, creativity and uniqueness, because when it's suddenly the group, not the individual, how do you let the individual express themselves in their ideas? But most of this, like social physics and social dynamics, show that really if you create good, healthy group processes, what you get is a result that everyone is happy with, and that actually when measured in some quality metrics, is having a higher quality. So I don't think, and I agree with the author, that this is not necessarily true, and it's how you negotiate and debate and the interaction that takes place before the compromises are made that decides the quality of this decision making. And I fully agree with this statement. So again, for me, it's really about the process, the voting itself. There's so many methods to do it, and can be what you prefer. Should it be the value you have in the system, or should it be the person, each individual person? So there should have one vote per person. All of these things, method you use, it can be fitted for the purpose of the vote, but the quality of what you're voting on depends on the process itself. Or as they say in many of these new books about experiments, is that you can experiment with anything, but the quality of the experiment depends on the questions you ask. So it's the same really for what are you voting on? The quality of how this improves the blockchain doesn't depend only on the vote itself, that it's a good vote, that it was fair. It also depends on this process creating these topics for voting and how they actually were created. Was it a good process that created a quality proposal? And I think every type of process like this, they need to have a form of credibility. So a direct representation, or one-to-one vote, or a direct democracy, or delegated, I'm sorry, not direct representative, but delegated representative. These all have credibility in that it's possible to track the number of votes, who you delegated to, and they will have a reputation over time, hopefully, in such a system. And for me, that's much better than these ad hoc groups. Nothing wrong with those. It's good experiments too, and it's good to understand what we need in these processes. But ideally, we will try to move as much as the process on-chain to make it not only verifiable, but we create data that we can improve on this decision-making process itself. So yeah, that's my points from the original article. Let's look a bit about the second treasury paper. In the second paper, they actually look through the different metrics of what they believe are good voting systems, and the qualities such voting systems should have, such as confidentiality, verifiability, accountability, sustainability, parity efficiency, suffrage, and liveliness. And this last point, the liveness, that was something I discussed in my 2020 summit presentation with the Black Swan events. And it's really important sometimes to have the ability to vote quickly when there's an emergency or a great opportunity. And we see this in nature, for example, ants, how they actually hold back some of the workers so that they have, because they have learned over evolution, this is a very good thing to do, because while 364 days are the same, then the one day that the disaster struck, it was really good for your survivability of your nest, that you did hold back the resources, so, and had the ability to quickly change or act upon it. And this is important in voting too, and in the blockchains that wants to survive and thrive. This is really, that's the underlying thing you do. Voting is just a decision-making process. And why are you making decisions? You're making decisions to make sure that your blockchain evolves, survives, thrives, improves. Oh yeah, evolve and improve. But yeah, you get the idea. It's you're not voting, or at least in a good voting system, you're not voting only for your personal benefit. That's good too, and a blockchain that survives and thrives will also have a personal benefit. But you want to set up this voting system so it's good for the underlying blockchain itself, or else you created a great short-term voting system, but you have not created a system that's sustainable over time. And they look through all of the different governance mechanisms that exist, and they differentiate in off-chain and on-chain. And of course they will compare the big ones, Ethereum, Bitcoin, but others as well. And then they go on to discuss these different properties they are looking into. And I think it's interesting, this part about confidentiality. I really like that they specialize it into privacy, because it's also hand in hand with transparency. So it's an interesting, you have the blockchain trilemma, but you also in voting how this you need to protect the voter so that the voter can vote freely, but you also need to track the vote and make sure that it's transparent for everyone and fair, because you can verify that the vote has been done in a certain way because of the available data. So you need transparency while you also need privacy. So it's an interesting dilemma. And this is in the verifiability, to verify that your input has been taken in account. That's one part of transparency, I guess, and that it's correctly computed. And now accountability, and that you can be somehow tracked and be held accountable to what you have provided in a voting system. And I think they use sustainability here quite widely. They're asking if it's enough incentives to evolve constructively. I believe also when they discuss it later down, they also look at, is it possible for everyone to have enough information to do a vote, to keep voting in the system, so that it's actually evolving. Because if you have a system where nobody can keep track of everything, it's very hard to vote, then you don't have sustainability. And the Pareto efficiency here means that you should have an outcome that could not be strictly improved by the voters' actual preferences. So sometimes you have this phenomenon of strategic voting, for example, that you actually vote in a way because you want to avoid someone or achieve a certain topic, but you're not actually voting on the candidate that you really wanted. And ideally, something is, in case of voting system, actually makes you the outcome something that you wanted and not something else than what you really preferred. That's good to have such a system. And it's important that there's some form of suffrage. So, for example, should only the whales of a blockchain be able to vote? Or the middle ground is you need to have some form of research so that you don't spam 0.1 Lovelace wallets to spam the voting system. And should there be some form? I know there's project on this. Like, so should you have like a form of one person per vote, some form of identity systems? All of these are important topics of suffrage. And should there be a form of liveliness to it? And sometimes you need to expediently have a voting process. So I love that the article goes through definitions, and so when it comes to secrecy, it should be it satisfies secrecy if the decision-making process is when it's held, an adversary cannot guess the input of any participant better than an adversarial algorithm whose only inputs are the overall tally. And if the adversary is a participant, the adversary's input as well. So basically it means you should not be able to predict who voted what, and thus you cannot easily influence any And this pseudonymity, blockchain satisfies this pseudonymity if no participant is required to reveal the real life identity to participate in the decision-making process. Again, you should not be able to do that so that you can reach out to these persons and influence a vote. Blockchain governance systems is coercion resistant if whenever a decision-making process is held, participant can deceive the adversary into thinking that they have behaved as instructed, and the participant has in fact made an input according to their own intention. This is like actually like a protection mechanism that you can be able to fake to a bad actor that you have voted something else than what you actually did. This lowers your threshold because you feel more protected. You will vote for what is your actual opinion, what you really believe in. Yeah. It should be verifiable, so end-to-end verifiability, and it should need this individual verifiability and this universal verifiability. And that you know that your vote has been created, stored and tallied, and that everyone can audit that votes from eligible voters are stored in the ballot box and all stored votes are properly tallied. And so this is about the Pareto efficiency, so that any voting scenario with more than 2 candidates is either dictatorial or subject to strategic voting. That was what I told earlier. So if you have more than 2 candidates, you could have all of these phenomena creating a scenario where you vote on not what you actually prefer, but you vote what you believe will cause what you actually prefer to have a win. Or at least avoid someone more terrible. Let's say you don't believe your actual preferences have any chance of winning, you will vote differently than to say to avoid that a bad representative would be voted in instead, for example. So in the definition here they want to achieve is that the blockchain governance system is Pareto efficient if whenever a decision-making process is held, alternative X cannot win if there exists another alternative Y that is preferred by at least one participant and no participant prefers X or Y. I guess this is like more of a soft type of Pareto efficiency where ideally you would have that a vote would end up with someone you actually preferred. But in this case, it's the bar is that at least one person that the one tally of votes for some. Let's say the example I said earlier, that someone you don't like. So if X is the someone you don't like, that this person cannot win if there was actually any other of the voters who preferred this other person Y that was actually a better candidate that was preferred by at least one, and the others, nobody preferred this X. Everyone wanted to vote strategically, so this X was never voted in, and one person at least preferred this Y person. So this is a soft part of efficiency definition, I guess. But it's a good point. You don't want to have a voting system that creates votes where the outcome is someone you actually did not want to vote in, or for a treasury, a project that you did not want to vote for. The other definitions, what they want to achieve: a blockchain governance system satisfies the property of accountability if whenever participants bring in a change that they are held individually responsible for it in a clearly defined way by the platform. So, for example, if a project is voted for with a treasury and this treasury is deducted, then you have this form of accountability whenever there's a project update, what the funds was gone to, you create a reputation, and the same for voters, so direct representatives. What did we vote for? Did this group of people vote for project that succeeded? I think it's important to have some form of being held responsible, and to do that you need to have some form of track record or some form of history. Another way is to be held responsible is the skin in the game, so that you have a value, and you could actually be, if the project is successful, you could be rewarded, and if the project is terrible, you could be deducted. That's also a way to be held accountable. And Polkadot, they have at least their stake locked while you vote, so you have to think careful what you vote for. Sustainability, you need to, in the definition, you have to have a sustainable development when blockchain systems, if it's incentivized via monetary rewards or otherwise, participants will develop successful improvement proposals for the platform are incentivized. And for the sustainable participation, you need to have a blockchain governance system that sustains participation if it incentivizes via monetary rewards or otherwise. Participants who participate in the decision-making process of the platform. I think I would add to this, you don't only need rewards, you also need it to be possible, achievable for participants to be able to participate. So if a system required to make 1,000 votes per day every day, it's not a sustainable participation in the voting system, because no person have the time to do that. This is one of the reasons I'm a big proponent of this, like global voting, more regional voting, and a local voting, because not everything everyone needs to vote on. You should let a local city project or a Norwegian project or whatever be voted on by the Norwegian community. Maybe the overall funding for this region could be voted by the overall community, and the more global questions should be voted globally, and the more regional questions should be voted regional. In this way, because if a voting system is widely successful, the success will in itself generate a problem, because there will be so many proposals. I guess this is what we are seeing in Catalyst now. So yeah, you need to have some form of filtering to be able to have sustainable participation, and that's my contribution to that topic. And of course you need this liveliness. So in their definition, a blockchain governance system satisfies liveness if it's capable of incorporating an input of urgency from the stakeholder and then being able of acting on it in the sense that if an issue is deemed to be urgent according to some function, then the decision-making procedure is capable of terminating within a reasonable amount of time, which is a function of the urgency of the matter. So this is what I told earlier, like in nature, you have these systems that sometimes you need to act quickly, sometimes you can have more time for a more deliberate process. And hacks are a big example of this. Huge divisions of the community causing potential hard forks are another. Other black swans, such as massive regulatory changes, changing the whole fundament of some, let's say the transaction layer, could be another black swan event. These things require that you can move fast if the change is urgent enough. And you need to have some form of rule of who can vote, and ideally you want as many people as possible to contribute to the vote, because it creates ownership, it creates value, because the more person, the bigger the group, the better the ideas, at least if you believe in group theories. It also creates some form of intrinsic value by making every person feel they are part of the system, no matter how small you are. And that's important, especially in proof of stake, I guess, because the system is very much prone to this centralization tendency, because the more you have, the easier it is to achieve and to keep growing more resources. If you have 60% of the resources and the inflation rate is 100% and it grows over 5 years, then your 60% will be larger if you keep staking it. So what you want is through the treasury to distribute also to new projects, to new blood, so that not only are you voting for what's in the interest of those that have most of the resources now, but also in the interest of the blockchain for evolving, so that it distributes back some of the value to new people that have better ideas that create more value for everyone. So the old school also wins, but you need to make sure that they have the chance. So one person, one vote is very hard to do on blockchain. There's of course a prison with a digital identifier and many possibilities there, so it's definitely something that could be possible. But for now I also see many dangers, such as very small wallets, and how do you prove it's actually identity? Is it easy to fake this? There's many pitfalls at least. And a good middle ground, as has been discussed earlier, is this quadratic voting, where yes, you get more vote, but when you have more value in the system, but it's a dampened effect. So the more you use of your value on a single vote, the more it costs. And that means also that if there's a majority of people involved in the project wanting another project, they at least have a higher chance of pushing this through in such a system. Yeah, and all of this suffrage, you can have different definitions of them. If it's identity-based, such as I discussed, is it token-based, is it mining-based, hash rate, such things. But you can also have this, who should be able to participate? Should it be people who have positively contributed to the platform? Should you avoid letting people who have negatively evolve the platform somehow? I think that brings up a lot of ethical questions, and I think the important part is also to protect this intrinsic value of the vote itself, that everyone has ability to vote. But yeah, the important part is to have this universal suffrage, so that anyone with a token or a mining hash rate can contribute to the project. And then it goes through evolving all of these projects on these different properties, and finding, I guess, that Catalyst is trying at least, and it's fulfilling many of these properties. I think it will be very interesting now to see with the digital representatives if we can try to make it fulfill more of these properties as well. And I think that will be a discussion for another video, because I see it's already 40 minutes long. But I just wanted to show you guys, like, what is my thinking about this. Do I have any clue of what I'm talking about? I have actually read all of this paper. I do read the theory. Maybe I'm not always the perfect definition of all of this, but this has been on my mind for so long, and it's something I think about a lot. It's something that I think about in my professional life. I'm always interested in better group processes that makes everyone win, or win-win scenarios. And for me, anything, voting is just a decision process. It's how you create the process itself that is important. It's not what you vote. It's not the vote that's important. It's what you vote on, and that's why you need to make sure that you have a good idea on how to produce quality proposals, quality votes, quality thing to vote on. I mean. So that's my 2 cents on this topic for now, and this is something I will probably produce more on. I hope you like this content, and thanks for now.